Good evening, everyone, or good morning, wherever you are. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's webinar. Good evening again, and I hope that you will enjoy tonight's session. My name is Tamoy Campbell, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. It is my greatest pleasure to welcome you to the UE Alumni Relations IAD Soft and Life Skills series on the topic Opportunities and Threats for nations, industries, and businesses in the current and changing global environment. Today's session promises to be scintillating, captivating, and definitely you are in for a treat. But just before we get into the main part of what we're here to talk about, I'm going to lay down just a few rules and ask you to just follow them accordingly. So, one, this is a voice activated call. So that means the slightest sound Zoom is going to pick up. So we're just asking you kindly to please mute your microphones, and you can turn on your cameras when we reach the Q&A sessions, but just ensure that the microphones are definitely muted. We will have a Q&A, so don't worry, you'll get the opportunity to pose your questions to our presenter, and the recording will be made available, so fret not. You can definitely put your information in the chat and we'll reach out to you and send you the recording. So ladies and gentlemen, you're not here to hear from me, but rather Ambassador Ralph Thomas. But his introduction will be done by Mrs. Celia Francis. Mrs. Celia Francis, the virtual stage is now yours to welcome Ambassador Thomas.
Thank you so much, Tamoy. It is my great pleasure to say good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who is online for wherever you are in the world. We're delighted to have you here. And it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you our presenter this evening, Ambassador Ralph Thomas, an accomplished businessman who served as Jamaica's ambassador to the United States and permanent representative to the Organization of American States in Washington, D.C. until April 2016, when he returned to the UWI Mona School of Business and Management, where he served on the faculty for several years. Prior to his assignment to the USA, he served as Jamaica's ambassador to the People's Republic of China, High Commissioner to the Republic of Singapore, and ambassador designate to Vietnam, Cambodia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and North Korea. He has a strong track record of economic diplomacy, working with states and enterprises to generate and develop business and investment opportunities. He is a senior teaching fellow of the Mona School of Business and Management and former director of strategy, and lectures in the subject areas of business in a global environment, business policy and strategy, and banking and finance. He is part of the consulting team of the Mona School of Business, providing strategic consulting to Caribbean enterprises. In terms of teaching, his areas include banking, finance, business strategy and enterprise, risk management at the postgraduate level and graduate level. He also provides executive education courses inclusive of design, development and delivery, and business strategy consulting to the Jamaican financial services industry and manufacturing companies, for them to improve executive and business performance and enterprise risk management. His extensive Wall Street career as a senior executive with the Bank of New York Mellon gives him an impressive track record in banking, finance and investments, corporate development and operations, strategic management and policymaking, and he has advised multinational corporations and mid-sized businesses on international business and investments, structured financing of international transactions and projects. Ambassador Thomas was trained at the Institute of the International Monetary Fund as a central banker in financial analysis and policy, and worked for the Bank of Jamaica in his early career. He has expert knowledge of the Jamaican and global economy. He has provided consulting services to government and the private sector and has an extensive network of global connections available to execute upon projects. He has served on the board of several institutions, including the Micro Investment Development Agency in Jamaica, where he was chairman, and Mental Health Association of Westchester in the USA. A proud UWI graduate, he did his bachelor's degree at Mona and has a master's in business administration, MBA, from Columbia University, New York. And he also has another important alumni connection, being a former president of the UWIAA New York chapter. So as you can understand, as Director of Alumni Relations, It was with great pelican pride that he is here this evening. Didn't have the pleasure of meeting him as president, but I had heard about him when I joined UWI, and we have been in touch over the years. So without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to invite him to share his expertise with us this evening on this very relevant topic. Over to you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. I think the introduction was enough and I could probably stop, but thank you so much for that warm welcome also. And of course, to the moderator and to the team from the UAI IAD that has put together this webinar along with the support of sponsors. Now, good evening again. And of course, this webinar is a part of the Life Skills series. And I welcome all those who have joined us for the next few minutes from locations across the globe. We face many changes in our daily lives because of a rapidly evolving global environment where political, technological, social, and economic changes emerge daily. How can nations, industries, and businesses affected by these changes respond dynamically and continue to survive and thrive? We face a constant barrage of news, fake news, and information arising from multiple media sources, including social media, which is both immediate and compelling. As we seek to comprehend and react to global and local events and anticipate ones that may occur that may change the world as we know it, we must seek to derive a deeper understanding of the global context in which we operate. Pandemics, geopolitical events leading to conflicts, climate change, and natural disaster calamities and disruptive technologies are constantly changing the way we do business. Cyber threats have, at the national, industry, business, and personal levels, are having severe social and financial impact. Everything ranging from ID theft to theft of company competitive data, hacking of voting systems, electronic theft of funds, sabotage of industries, and invasion of privacy, including medical data. Recently, in America, the use of ransomware shut down the Colonial Pipeline for several days until the ransom was paid, inconveniencing millions of drivers and businesses across the USA who could not get adequate supplies of gasoline for their vehicles. But technology remains a key driver of economic growth, providing many benefits and opportunities for all. Artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things, IoT, connects devices, including household appliances, and has transformed the way we use data to solve problems and deliver solutions, giving rise to new manufacturing processes, new products, reconfigured supply chains, and value chains. New products have emerged, such as mobile devices, self-driving cars, trucks and drones with business, military, and emergency healthcare applications, among many others. The mobile phone provides access to everything from your door, your bank account, your employment. Many new industries are being created through the mobility industry, which now is reshaping how we move efficiently by connecting previously unrelated parts of other industries. So we see that also in transport. Platform business models, like Amazon, provide opportunities for small businesses to access global markets and seamlessly exchange goods or services for money and to quickly scale up operations with very little capital. Blockchain technology provides powerful tools to authenticate and secure transactions and build trust, and will become integral to each step of the supply chain, including things like customs clearance and air travel across and within borders. And of course, we've heard about cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Ethereum, etc., have emerged and can circumvent the regulated financial system and thereby affect the regulatory power and control of central banks. So we are facing tremendous changes coming out of new technologies that are being adopted. In my presentation today, I propose to discuss the global ecosystem in which nations compete and reiterate the interdependency of nations in a globalized world and the intrinsic value of deep and broad, insightful knowledge of the evolving global landscape. This slide, of course, in overview, provides a broad framework for conducting different levels of analysis by looking at broad global trends, followed by regional and sub-regional trends. Then, of course, nations and industries within nations, then companies. So we can start by looking at the global context in orange, and then regional, such as Latin America and Caribbean, and how it impacts. We can go deeper and look at country context, such as Jamaica or another country. We can look within the context of a country at various industries labeled here as industry 1, 2, and 3. And we can see how, coming from the outside, looking in, various changes and forces might impact upon different aspects of our lives and at different levels. So we want to be aware of that. We could also go in the other direction, starting with our company, looking at our company within our industry, and of course, the context of within our national context, our sub-region, CARICOM, broaden, Latin American and Caribbean, then the global context. So we have a framework of analysis that we can take the parts and look at them separately or together. Disruptions in the global ecosystem affect the competitiveness of nations and set off further adjustments to their foreign policy, trade, and investment policies, with direct impact on other nations, industries, and businesses, and individuals globally. Looming over the global economic ecosystem is a threat of the rising geopolitical and economic power and reach of China, an increasing share of world trade that triggers actions by other nations in the Americas, in Europe, and Asia. China's share of global trade expanded even after the pandemic from 13.2% of total global trade to now to 14.7% in 2020, despite the pandemic. So they've been quick to recover. Whether we are decision makers in government, business leaders, or investors or other stakeholders, we remain exposed to all the risks, uncertainties, and opportunities identified. Now, as we trace the underpinnings of our current situation, we note that with the onset of globalization in the 70s and 80s, the concept of a purely domestic economy all but disappeared. All businesses now operate in a global market. Well, this was an important tipping point in the reset of the existing world order from one of mercantilism and its protected markets and exchange control restrictions on capital on one hand, to neoliberalism and free markets and free movements of capital on the other. With the removal of tariff protections, at that time, nations adopted the World Trade Organization edict, new entrants from distant shores quickly invaded the once protected markets with globally standardized products that were often cheaper substitutes for local offerings, and they still are. In small open economies like Jamaica and across the globe, many industries fail to quickly respond and make the changes to compete at global standards and deliver competitive prices to defend their markets. They were ill prepared to respond as they lacked economic stability, adequate foreign reserves, capital resources, and managerial capabilities to scale up local industries and compete. The dairy, manufacturing, and agriculture industries collapsed in Jamaica, and debt and IMF dependency grew, along with social discord. But globalization brought many benefits, as it expanded potential markets for all participants, and global trade flows and capital flows expanded, not only coming from the traditional developed countries of the North down to other regions, but now included new flows between and from emerging nations, including, of course, the BRICS. We have seen these capital inflows into hotels and highway infrastructure, North-South Highway, and industries like financial services in Jamaica and CARICOM through foreign direct investments and acquisitions, and a lot of those have been in the financial services industry. Developing countries, including small open economies like Jamaica, have learned to adapt to the new global ecosystem, some more quickly than others, by creating infrastructure such as airports, enterprise zones, ports, and transshipment and other facilities, while educating their people to higher levels. But this is not enough in a changing global environment, I caution, as innovation and technology are the new frontiers for improving national competitiveness. Now, multinational corporations, of course, who have been key actors in securing the benefits of globalization, disperse their value chains across the globe to access markets, to achieve production and distribution efficiencies, and of course, to obtain resources, as the bauxite companies in Jamaica, and strategic assets through acquisitions across the globe, as nations followed development strategies to attract those businesses to operate in their country at scale, and also provided tax advantages. And so there has been a win-win in some cases, and countries have actually improved their level of development based upon those arrangements. Financial markets thrived, and securities were traded 24/7 across the globe through money centers in London, USA, and Asia. The process of financialization of assets occurred, and the interconnected or systemic nature of the global payment system emerged. The world, as we knew it, had changed for the better, and the pros of globalization outweighed the cons, it was believed. Now, the second tipping point in the progress of globalization occurred when the global financial crisis of 2007-2008 impacted economies across the globe. And from the chart, of course, we can see in a quick snapshot how the global economy had progressed and the very deep decline that we see in 2008-2009 as the world went into recession. Then we saw a recovery, and then, of course, a very steady effort to crawl back to normalcy. When Wall Street collapsed, the world financial markets collapsed like a stack of dominoes as they faced contagion. Financial markets in Asia, Europe, North America, and Latin America experienced shock and decline. The shock felt in Jamaica led to a period of prolonged recession and stifled growth, demonstrating how vulnerable we are to changes in the global ecosystem. As systemic risk was addressed, markets and economies recovered across the globe. But developing countries responded more slowly. Businesses were affected by shrinking markets due to the deep worldwide economic depression, and business failures increased globally. Now, if we take a quick look at the share of GDP of different countries, we will see that the big players here in blue, the United States, in orange, of course, the European Union. And we see China in green. We see the rest of the world, Australia, Canada, and so on. We can see the distribution of world GDP, but we see that 2/3 favored the European Union, China, and the United States. And so as they compete for a share of world income, that sets off various tensions. Now, new players emerged with new business models and employing more efficient use of capital and technology. World markets expanded as new value chains and supply chains were deployed to meet heightened consumer demands. The customer became far more important, far more valuable. And information and data about customers is one of the most valuable assets any company can have. And the issue is, how do you unlock that valuable resource of information and data on customers and their behaviors? In responding, of course, to the threats to globalization caused by the financial collapse, institutions, of course, and enterprise risk management capabilities were strengthened across the globe, and nations developed greater resilience to exogenous shock. The IMF World Bank itself adapted to the needs of the times and provided strong liquidity and support to enable nations to avoid a deepening catastrophe, to achieve economic stability and reposition for growth. Globalization was intact and the institutions were working, and we too in Jamaica benefited from IMF programs with all the difficulties and conditionalities that really brought us to a point of stability that we were poised for takeoff, as we have said over and over again for many years. But we now face another tipping point, which is the emergence of dissatisfaction by many nations with their relative gains from globalization and their willingness to take unilateral action outside of the rules-based World Trade Organization to address changes. Previously, complaints would be brought to the World Trade Organization, take many years to resolve, but now countries are not waiting for that process to play out. They are taking matters into their own hands. A rising tide of nationalism across the world has given rise to the new trade wars and created shifting geopolitical and trade alliances running counter to the tenets of globalization as we came to know it. Again, more threats and opportunities to consider. What does it mean for us? We have entered a period of deglobalization that presents new challenges and new opportunities and requires new strategies and new business models that include a redefinition of the value proposition offered by businesses to customers and other stakeholders. And of course, a business model has many parts that can be arranged in different ways, centering on this value proposition. And by re-engineering your business model, your company can perform differently and become more competitive. So business model engineering is a very important part of the discourse as we now face challenges. So I raise the question of business models. 4, recent developments in Europe, in Asia and North America indicate how free trade arrangements too can reshape the global economy. And we can look no further than Brexit. In Europe, the regional integration movement of 27 nations that accounts for more than 30% of world GDP. The European Union remains disrupted at this time by Britain's exit in 2020 and the impact it had on Europe's hitherto deeply integrated economy. And we might have been surprised at how large a share Europe had of the global pie. So I keep the graph up, the picture up. Now, all of this, of course, with Brexit and the EU has implications for CARICOM countries that must swiftly negotiate new alliances and separate trade agreements and investment agreements with the EU and with the UK, either bilaterally as one country or collectively as CARICOM. The present foreign policy disagreements with CARICOM makes it both difficult and more urgent, and continued disunity remains a threat to the region. So CARICOM, in this time of crisis, really has to get its act together so we can move forward in these international and global engagements. The second one we look at is the EU-China Comprehensive Agreement on Investments, the CAI. The European Union has backed away from the important EU-China Comprehensive Agreement on Investments that they had negotiated for over 7 years and was about to be signed. And they raised allegations of human rights violations in China, echoing what we have also heard coming from America and other places. Geopolitical complexities are evident as the EU seeks to reposition with the change of administration in Washington and simultaneously strengthen EU-America relationships, it too damaged by imposition of US tariffs on EU goods and countermeasures by the EU. So again, it's getting a little bit more complicated. Now we turn to Asia and look at something called the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, the RCEP. This was a major development affecting 30% of world trade. And this was a signing of this RCEP agreement by the 15 member nations of the grouping called the ASEAN grouping of nations of Southeast Asia, plus 5 other regional partners, including Australia. And India and the USA were supposed to join, but both withdrew under, of course, the Trump administration. But it proceeded, and it's significant to note that the RCEP could add $209 billion to world incomes and $50 billion to world trade by 2030, favoring a tilt to the ASEAN Strategic Alliance. So Asia is benefiting from trade agreements, moving a little more smoothly than we are seeing in other parts of the world. But even this is not uneventful, as Australia and China are having a squabble over many products and iron ore exports to China. Australia is the major supplier of iron ore for the steel industry, which, if unresolved, could create a significant hit to Australia's GDP. And Australia has about $104 billion in exports to China. But importantly, shut down China's smelters. So we see some problems there. But could this affect Jamaica? Of course. Our booming building industry, and we see these high rises on every street, and every single lot has huge buildings on them now, are dependent on steel imports from China, and prices of steel are rising. And these are the causes why prices are rising. So we have to be aware of what's happening in the global environment, because it does affect us locally and elsewhere across the globe. In the USA, we can look at NAFTA. And in the last 4 years, we have seen pushbacks against the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, which is an arrangement, a free trade arrangement between the USA, Mexico, and Canada, where, of course, they can operate without tariff barriers in a free trade area. And that has given rise to tremendous growth in business integration and, of course, production, manufacturing, and also exports. It has been good. But the USA sought to reset the rules to restore its competitive advantage, because these agreements have to be evaluated over time. And of course, they finally came to an agreement, as each had more to lose if they exited. But you can only imagine the impact on a country like Jamaica, a small home economy, or our region, if NAFTA had dissolved. Would it be threat or opportunity? You decide. Now, with respect to USA and China, the ongoing USA-China trade dispute that escalated during the Trump administration was accompanied by imposition of unilateral tariffs and sanctions by both countries beyond the framework of the WTO as an intermediary. And we said that the WTO, of course, was a place to make your complaint and have it mediated, and to take a little while, a couple of years, to resolve. Countries have no patience, no tolerance for that. And so countries are taking very quick action. And that, of course, is reversing some of the gains that we expected from globalization. This continues to impact the supply chains of efficiency-seeking US companies who manufactured or sourced goods in China for US distribution and for world markets. Major trade agreements create opportunities for bilateral partners, but disruptions cause uncertainty, deepening risks, and opportunities for industries and businesses across the world that must be understood and responded to by appropriate strategic actions. What can we expect? Well, we can expect further decoupling, put in parentheses, decoupling of the US economy from China under the Biden administration, to be accompanied by strengthening global alliances to counter China's growing hegemony, and also incentives for multinational corporations to move large parts of their value chains and supply chains back to America or other strategic locations. And what of CARICOM in all of this? CARICOM businesses, of course, as you know, we are part of the CBI, Caribbean-Based Initiative Zone, which has duty-free access to the US market. A big advantage that we don't take enough opportunities. We have not seized enough of that opportunity. CARICOM businesses can anticipate and develop new opportunities for our region for CBI-related investment projects that can enjoy duty-free access to the US markets under the new trade regime that emerges. So any trade displacement that takes place, maybe we can plug ourselves into that discussion, but it requires intervention and conversations to take place. Let's take a quick look at the projections. We know that there has been disruptions with COVID and so on, but let's look at the future projections for world economies. And of course, we see that the advanced economies, all economies, first of all, advanced economies have suffered from the COVID shock. We're doing an average 2.8 was the world output, dropped to 4.8, and in 2021 is projected to recover to 5.2%. So world GDP is projected to improve, and that's a very strong outturn, 5.2 before, better than it was before COVID. Very interesting. And if we go country by country, we can see, of course, the United States having slumped, now returning to a bit stronger growth at 3.1%. The Euro area, which in 2020 had fallen 8.3%, of course, projected to go to 5.2%. Germany, France, of course, and we see that they're projected to go forward. We can look at the EU, the United Kingdom also, and we see that they've had a very steep decline, also projected to improve, but they're still having some difficulties. If we look though at the emerging markets and developing economies, what is the situation here? Do note that China is not in the grouping called the developed economies. This is IMF data. They're really in the grouping called emerging markets and developing economies. Their per capita GDP is not much different than Jamaica because of their very large population of 1.35 billion persons. Yet they are a very rich country, and one would say very developed country, but they're in this grouping. so they distort our numbers. But despite the decline, 1.7% in 2020, they are expected to return to growth of 8.8% based on IMF data in 2021. The ASEAN countries, of course, we saw some shocks in the ASEAN countries. Also, we see Latin America, where we see Mexico slumped 9% down, coming back to 3.5%. Middle East slumping again, 3.1. Africa didn't slump as much and didn't recover as much. And low-income countries, low-income developing countries, which had fallen by 1.2%, are now slated to grow by 4.9. So it is not a very discouraging scenario that, unlike the recession that we saw blighting world GDP after 9/11, we are seeing the 2007, 2008 economic shock, we're actually seeing some projections for a return to economic growth across the globe. Now, the US economy, of course, remains the largest, world's largest, with China only $7.3 trillion away from closing the gap by 2028. And this reflects the difference in growth rates projected by the IMF and you saw it, 3.1% in USA versus 8.8% in China, demonstrating China's resilience to a COVID-19 shock. Importantly, we note that nations rise and fall in relative power as their share of the global economy increases or declines. And they seek to respond to these challenges and the opportunities presented by taking actions to secure their own economic and geopolitical interests. In the present context, these actions may be far-reaching, and some actions may be disruptive to businesses, and in the worst-case scenario, threaten world peace as adjacent issues come to the fore. So it would be good to have some foresighting of how some of these things may play out. The challenge of the tragic COVID-19 epidemic, with over 165 million infections and 3.45 million deaths, is playing out in parliaments and boardrooms everywhere. The pandemic has caused economies and industries across the world to shut down, cause unemployment, business failures, increase in poverty worldwide, but there has been a measure of recovery. Not surprisingly though, and this is important, it has empowered the rise of digitally enabled companies to take advantage of new modalities of doing business and create new platform business models that connect suppliers and buyers across platforms that secure the transfer of goods and value in a way that has not been done before. It has also created a new relationship with the human resource, many of whom were unable to work from home, lowering business and office overheads costs. So again, the nature of the office environment has changed, and some of those costs that were attendant on producing goods and services may permanently have been reduced, and many changes will become permanent. Consumers who shop from home, of course, can enjoy seamless delivery of products from an array of choices. E-commerce is thriving and driving profits of major companies who have quickly reconstructed their business models to emphasize the e-commerce channel over bricks and mortar stores. And we can see the results of that showing up in financial markets. The COVID-19 pandemic has further reinforced and accelerated the depth of geography. That was a feature of globalization. And it allows businesses to extend their market reach to far-off customer segments and locations. And this transition to e-commerce is a moment, a teaching moment, and a learning moment that we need to understand, that we need to reimagine how we do business in Jamaica and across the globe. Whether we are a large company, middle size or small, we can learn some lessons and adapt to this new reality that exists. Now, as we look at the financial markets, of course, before the outbreak, let's see what happened. We did see here in the early part, 2020, that financial markets plummeted, yeah? But we saw a gradual climb, a slow and steady climb in all markets. And here we're looking at the Nikkei, which is Japan, Hong Kong, Shanghai, China, the Dow Jones Industrial Average in the USA, Italy, the MIB exchange, and the FTSE 100, which is London. And if we just look at the graphs, we see them declining immediately with the COVID shock and some recovery taking place. But we see two groupings, one group doing far better. So Asia is doing better and America is doing better. And the ones which are recovering but not as well are Europe. Again, we're seeing a divergence between Europe and America, Europe and Asia in terms of financial market growth. So important observations in terms of how coronavirus has impacted financial markets. And this is a result of business transformations that companies have made to take advantage of the new situation and to improve and still do well and outperform markets. Now, if we look at the numbers, we will have seen that Japan, its market is up by 22.9%, stellar growth. China, 16.1%. In America, the Dow Jones, a very respectable 7.1%. And of course, Italy down 5.3%, and London, FTSE 11.6%. So Asian markets are now enjoying a bull run post-COVID, followed by Wall Street, with European markets still recovering. This tells us a story. We can look at maybe some industries also that have benefited. And we can look at the pharmaceutical industry and percentage change in share value. Well, of course, we know that the pharmaceutical companies have indeed benefited from the COVID epidemic. We will see, of course, that Moderna is up 715%. 715%. And if we had bought Moderna stock, we wouldn't be having this webinar today. We'd be maybe doing something else on a beach or something. 715%, followed by Novavax of 224%, AstraZeneca 30.8%, and Pfizer is down 10.4%, and I'm not sure why, but it would be interesting to find out the differences between the business models of all four. But we can see that the pharmaceutical industry has outperformed. Now, overshadowing the many opportunities and threats, of course, is the specter of global warming and climate change with its unpredictable consequences and timing. But we are now seeing that there are winners and losers in that crisis. So do something seems to be the mantra. Don't hunker down and wait for recovery. With respect to climate change impact, rising temperatures are likely to reduce global wealth significantly by 2050. As crop yields fall, disease spreads, and rising seas consume coastal cities. And we are seeing the loss of the shoreline in Jamaica. Swiss Re, one of the world's largest providers of insurance to other insurance companies, warned, highlighting the consequences if the world fails to quickly slow the use of fossil fuels. They continue that the effects of climate change can be expected to shave 11% to 14% of global economic output by 2050, compared to the growth levels without climate change. That amounts to as much as $23 trillion in reduced annual global economic output worldwide because of climate change. Climate change matters. Poor nations, I quote, would be particularly hit, but few would escape. The findings could influence how the industry prices, being insurance, prices insurance and invests its mammoth portfolios. Well, I say that, let me note that climate mitigation strategies must be pursued now by small open economies requiring billions of dollars of investment to increase climate change resilience. Environmental, social, and governance optimization requirements must be built into companies' business models to ensure that they contribute to environmental sustainability of the host countries and the businesses they operate. And shareholders will begin to reward them for that. SOEs should focus on circular economic models to maximize use of resources and eliminate waste and pollution in a well-planned value chain coordination process, including alternative energy, waste recovery and recycling, and value-adding food processing of agricultural products. This provides opportunities for businesses who can benefit from capacity building funding from multilateral institutions and governments. So there's money out there that businesses can access to carry out some part of these changes. The climate change agreement, COP21, has been in trouble for some time with the US withdrawal, with the goal being to limit climate change and increases and global warming to less than 2%, and we lost 4 years. But the positive outlook, of course, now after a major setback, is that recently the Biden administration moved swiftly to reverse the US retreat from the COP21 climate change agreement, signed by Jamaica also, but by the previous administration, in a return to multilateral diplomacy to solve common problems. A little bit more of what we had expected from globalization. Let us breathe a collective sigh of relief that at least there is a beginning, but we have lost time. Climate change is real. Now, we are in something called a VUCA world. Volatility, ambiguity, complexity, uncertainty, which according to the Harvard Business Review is short for saying, hey, it's crazy out there. HBR points out the pitfall of assuming there's nothing you can do by identifying the VUCA characteristics and outlining the following 4 responses based on evaluating what you know of the situation versus how well you can predict the results of your actions. And so it gives rise to these 4 scenarios. Well, volatility, which we have seen in financial markets, we have seen it in cryptocurrencies, we've seen it in commodities and so on, of course, usually is attributable to causes and effects unknown, volatility, instability. And the response prescribed is build in slack and devote resources to preparedness. With respect to uncertainty, of course, the cause and effect known, but information is still lacking. And I should take this window down, it's blocking my slide, right? Just a second, yeah. So cause and effect known, but information lacking and outcome unknown. Invest in information, interpret and share, add analysis networks that reduce uncertainty. So work together to build information and interpretation and share and learn in that process. Complexity relates to many interconnected parts and variables that are hard to comprehend. And response, restructure, hire or develop specialists, build up adequate resources. Ambiguity, causal relationships unclear. It's ambiguous. Well, experiment, generate hypotheses and test them. Apply lessons broadly. So now we turn to some suggestions for strategies that companies can carry out. The Boston Consulting Group provides 9 strategies for thriving in an era of social tension, economic nationalism, and technological revolution that will help companies thrive in the face of a new global environment that we have discussed tonight. And what are these 9 strategies? Well, the first is to reimagine core operations to deliver societal impact. 2, offer compelling digital solutions and experiences, not just physical products or services. And I repeat, apply digital solutions and experiences, not just physical products or services. Customers will pay for shared experiences, within which, of course, you can sell products. So that's something to ponder in terms of how companies can strategize. 3, grow selectively and in ways, of course, suitable for the local environment. 4, supplement traditional value chains with dynamic new value webs that create and deliver solutions, outcomes, and experiences that customers crave. So you're building networks. 5, invest in high-tech, multi-local factories, and delivery centers that can deliver customized offerings fast. We've seen how Amazon has done that by placing delivery centers all over the world in neighborhoods and so on. And you order something, and by the following day, there's a knock at your door and it's delivered. 6, build a global data architecture and analytical capabilities. And of course, large data, how do you manipulate data? How do you recognize the value of data that is in your company, value of information? How do you transform that? How do you give it meaning? How do you use that to learn about your customer and what your customer's needs are and anticipate what's the next thing they want and supply that and support it? So that, I think, is an important one also to strengthen your analytical capabilities. 7, move away from the traditional matrix organization model in favor of agile, customer-focused teams supported by platform capabilities. So that is an experimentation for the human resource persons to think through how you get people, some at home, some in the office, some in warehouses, some far away, to work together in empowered teams using digital capabilities, of course, to deliver solutions. Then 9, embrace always-on transformation instead of one and done change initiatives. And so as I close on my presentation, to these, I will add, of course, the creation of powerful ecosystems of business to sustain competitiveness, more interactions between companies and within industries that will give rise to knowledge exchanges and create new industries, coupled with expanded spending on research and development. Some companies are spending 40% of their expenses now, 30%, 40%, 20% in research and development. And I would add innovation to transform their business models. And so it's very important to put more into that, because if you look at the financial statements of most companies around us, only a very small portion is carved out for research and development and innovation. I had seek the advice of unique individuals with deep, broad, and distinctive knowledge of the constantly changing world stage to enable your organization to safely navigate the rapidly evolving global landscape. Knowledge and insight have financial value. Let me say in conclusion that globalization is not dead, but will take a new form with new winners and losers. Nations, industries, and businesses can learn and adapt and take advantage of the opportunities while avoiding or mitigating the risks. And so that closes my presentation. And of course, we're open now for questions, and over back to you, moderator.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Thomas. I really enjoyed your presentation. And I think a lot of us here on the platform, here huddled in Zoomland, absolutely enjoyed it. It was thorough, it was informative, very cogent, but you did leave us with solutions and strategies, which is really, really helpful and super insightful. So thank you again, Ambassador. And as you rightly said, it's Q&A time. So ladies and gentlemen, as I had said in the chat, this is an opportunity for you to post your questions in the chat, and I could read it aloud. Or if you're so minded, you could raise your hand, we acknowledge you, and then you can come onto the mic and post some questions to the ambassador. But Ambassador, we already have some questions that we got in earlier, so I'll feed them to you right now. And the first one is, in light of the COVID-19 pandemic and its effects on the main earning industries for the Caribbean islands, namely tourism and entertainment, what are the best possible options or solutions for small businesses in these sectors to help them rebound?
Okay, so that's a very interesting question. And let me ask also that we type the questions in the chat so that we can keep up with it. But I have this one, right? So in light of the COVID pandemic and its effects on the main revenue earning industries for Caribbean islands, tourism and entertainment, what are the best options or solutions for small business in those sectors? So let me say that small business too can benefit by some of the strategies we've described. And small business covers a wide spectrum, from sole proprietorships to larger businesses that hire people to middle-sized businesses also. So the range of small business is calculated differently in different countries, of course. So small businesses do not have to be businesses that don't have very smart people, that don't embrace technology, that don't think about business models or think about strategy or think about global markets. So the first thing I would say for small business is to not see yourself only as part of a domestic Jamaica, a domestic market of 3 million persons. See yourself as part of a global market, because you have enabling technologies to allow you from your computer, your laptop, your iPhone, or any device to interact with companies abroad or an individual abroad. We have 3 to 4 million persons coming to Jamaica every year in tourism, stopover, or cruise shipping. Yet we do not tap into those 4 million persons on an individual basis after they are gone. There is the potential, first of all, for tourism industry to give us and to give small business access to those persons, not necessarily physical access, because they have come to Jamaica, they've enjoyed our music, they've enjoyed our entertainment or recreation, they have enjoyed experiences, the Dunsriver experience. We, small business, can virtualize some of those experiences so they can continue to enjoy. And if you're in the middle of winter and you'd like to imagine yourself in Jamaica, there are virtual reality technologies that could put you exactly where you thought you would be in Jamaica. And of course, you wouldn't have the alcohol or other things to go with it, so you could have that bottle of wine at home, but you could enjoy Jamaica. So we are in a world where a lot of experiences can be virtualized. And small business, we have to begin to think of small businesses, not only about selling physical things, which is a big deal too, by the way. So we can sell over these platforms that exist. I buy coffee. Here I am in Atlanta today, and I buy coffee online, and I want Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee, and it's being provided by about 8 providers are on the Amazon site, and I pick the one with the best price and the best product, and somehow it's at my door within 2 or 3 days, because obviously the supply of it is already in America, sitting in a warehouse close by. So Jamaican companies, some are small business, already taking advantage of what we call these platform business models. They exist in China, Alibaba and other models. They exist in America, Amazon and other models, eBay and Craigslist, and you can name many others. So we have to begin to think about infusing small business in Jamaica with technology. A lot has been said. We've said capital limitations. We've said all kinds of things about small business in Jamaica. But if we can move them away from bricks and mortar investments into more virtualized investments with low capital requirements, but we do have to bring up the knowledge base and the skill. And our people are very bright people and very skillful people. We send them abroad and they win awards in every university and in every walk of life. So the Jamaican can be trained, and we must change expectations for education. We must change expectation for how we train people beyond reading and writing to be able to adapt to the enabling technologies which are everywhere. We can invent apps. There's an app for everything. Somebody in Jamaica invented an app for cars to avoid potholes. We see GIS, geolocation. There are so many different things that we can connect and innovate to create new products. So my advice to small business then is, of course, to begin to rethink and retool and to begin to develop new capabilities to take advantage of the global market using enabling technologies. And if you can't do it yourself, then hire somebody or partner with somebody so you can scale up. And that's the other limitation, scaling up so that you begin to get some efficiencies and really begin to make some money, not just put food on the table. So that's a dream for small business, that we can rise to this challenge. And at this time, with all of these changes that we're seeing in the global environment, move small business into its rightful place, driving the Jamaican economy and getting beyond 1% of GDP to really make Jamaica this place to live, work, and raise families. So I ended up with a punchline, right?
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I really love your answer. So small business, you stop small of yourself. As you heard Ambassador Thomas said, literally tap into making some of the goods and services you offer via virtual experience. Don't let when the tourists come that the experience just stop here. Virtualize it. And as Ambassador Thomas said, if you can't do it, partner with somebody else who can. Thank you so much, Ambassador. And we have more questions coming in, so we're definitely going to be putting them your way. The next question is, what are the prospects for direct foreign investment in small island states, given the current global economic environment?
Okay, so I think, let me just say from the outset that Jamaica has been a great place to attract foreign direct investment. We have seen it coming into highways. We have seen buyout of businesses. Jamaica has great possibilities for FDI. And of course, to get FDI into Jamaica, you have to reach out. Economic diplomacy. You have to talk to people face to face to make them comfortable. We can make Jamaica, of course, and efforts are being made constantly to improve the Jamaican environment.
When I click on this, how do I get my...
And the ease of doing business. I think we have a microphone open. Right. So we know that there's an environment to attract. Now, some efforts are being made to put in enterprise zones, to improve infrastructure and so on, to attract further investments of FDI. We are seeing investments in tourism because tourism will recover. This crisis, known as the COVID-19 pandemic, is going to end. We already are seeing actors moving and changing, and we're seeing economic growth. We're seeing stock markets benefiting because they are winners and losers. So therefore, question is, what foreign direct investment do we want in Jamaica that we must consider is appropriate for Jamaica? So I think, and for small island developing states, clearly we are import dependent for food. We do not sustain ourselves with food. We import everything. Agro-processing, attracting foreign direct investment in that. Medical tourism. Near shore, we have seen the BPOs come to Jamaica to perform part of the supply chain, value chain of North American corporations. More of that will come to Jamaica. But we must be focused on what FDI do we want, because FDI also takes the burden off governments to pay from the public purse, from the taxation, the taxed revenues, to create development. When you brought FDI in to build the North-South Highway, the investor had to earn his return from operating the road, and the government did not attach increasing debt. So again, it's good for all of us. And I think the short answer is the outlook is quite good if we seize the opportunity to go. And people like, of course, JAMPRO and others are active and need to really, and our foreign embassies and need trade attaches attached that are knowledgeable to talk to business. And I think we can do this. And FDI, I expect, can improve at this time.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. So we have some more questions here. This was an earlier one. And I think this was from Sean. And he said, is there much hope rather for developing countries with challenging GDP levels? Is there much hope for developing countries with challenging GDP levels?
There's scope for countries with challenging GDP levels. Okay, so I interpret the question to mean that some countries have not done as well as others have done in the global economy. Slow growth. At Jamaica, of course, we've said over 40 years, but for a little blip in the past, at the very beginning, when our economy was small, we have not had rapid growth. We do suffer from a high percentage of informality, that a lot of the activity is really not captured in the GDP numbers. But put that aside, how do we manage to grow GDP? Is there scope for us? And absolutely yes, but there are things we would need to do. So the question is really, what should nations do to improve their competitiveness? And an approach to that is to say that there are 12, the World Economic Forum would say there are 12 pillars of national competitiveness. And of course, the basic factors, efficiency factors, and then the last ones are, of course, sophistication and innovation. So if we really want to grow the economy, we must focus on innovation and sophistication. And that takes us into the conversation we had today about how to take advantage of the opportunities using digitally enabled strategies, using platform models and new ways of taking advantage of the global marketplace. So I say yes, but it depends on us making some changes, doing some more things or doing them better. And we can change the game.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Loving it. So we have some more questions here. And I think it was when you were on that NAFTA point, Andre had to say that Jamaica did not see any benefit from NAFTA. So how were we excluded? Perhaps you can go in depth on that conversation for us, Ambassador.
Could you repeat that question?
Sure, no problem. So Andre was saying that Jamaica didn't see any benefits while they were a part of NAFTA. So how could you say we were excluded? And if Andre would love to come on the microphone and have some more and provide more clarity, rather, that would be amazing. But that's a question that was posted at Ambassador.
All right. Well, NAFTA is a subtopic, right? Yeah. So NAFTA is a trade agreement between three countries: America, Mexico, and Canada. We're not a signatory to that agreement. It's not us. We're not in that, right? But it had an impact on us because if you watch the movie Life and Debt, and I do commend us all to watch that documentary, BBC documentary, which showed Jamaica at a time of the onset of globalization and how when the tariff barriers were removed and foreign goods came in and so on, and we couldn't put up barriers, how industries collapsed. Yeah. Just about that time, we also saw in the free trade zone, we had, of course, the textile industry from America that Jamaica borrowed money, some $50 million US at the time, a lot of money, to build this free trade zone for US companies to come in and to manufacture and assemble garments with raw materials from America. It created jobs, very low paying jobs. But you know what? It created jobs. And so there are thousands of persons working in the free trade zone, not unlike the BPOs, by the way. So I don't want to compare them because they are a whole different level, but similar arrangement where, because of the global situation, it made sense to come to Jamaica to produce under the Caribbean Basin Initiative because the goods could return to America duty-free. And Jamaica benefited from that. But the minute NAFTA was signed, And now there's a seamless market. It made more sense to simply manufacture in Mexico. You could have economies of scale. You could have low-cost labor. You could truck things across the border, etc., very easily. All those companies shut down. Tommy Hilfiger, Hanes, major brand names were in Jamaica, and they left Jamaica to manufacture in Mexico, NAFTA. And so we can see that these trade agreements did make a difference. Now, during the time with the squabble, let me not say squabble, the renegotiation of NAFTA, let me say it in diplomatic terms, that there was a real fear, there was a threat that America would withdraw from NAFTA. Yeah, they were getting some really hard pushes against Canada and against Mexico, build a wall and so on. That was the tone. When we thought about what could have made NAFTA dissolved, some of those companies could have found themselves back into Jamaica. We might have been an attractive location again for a whole set of businesses that were there. We could have harvested that, because again, it's not changed the equation, because Mexico would not be a favored nation with goods going into America duty-free, but Jamaica would be. See, so the logic of how trade agreements change, that this can affect the business judgment of companies and make something that didn't make sense before make sense. So that's my quick response to NAFTA and NAFTA changes. And I thank you for that question.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ambassador. And we've noted the movie that we have to put on our to watch list as well, Life and Death. So, Ambassador, my apologies, had two questions. The first one, where does the Caribbean and Latin America stand in terms of integration, especially through trade integration?
Okay, now there are 6 different types of integration movements. Regional integration movements are really important ways to join a bigger group so that as a force you can compete in markets. We've seen how the European Union captures a third of world trade by being European Union, and how it's fragmented. CARICOM, 15 nations in a very highly integrated form of movement called, of course, a common market. So you can go from just partial trade agreements to free trade agreements like NAFTA, custom union, economic and monetary union like European Union, and then political union. There's a sliding scale, right? So regional integration movements matter. CARICOM is really far advanced on having a common market. Customs, goods can move between, supposedly have free movement of labor and so on. It is really supposed to be highly integrated. It does not have one thing Europe has, which is of course a central bank, a common central bank. So that's the only other further integration where we could coordinate monetary policy activity. But CARICOM is highly integrated, but CARICOM is, some companies have benefited. We have had our little squabbles of trade war with Trinidad and Jamaica and so on. But we have not come together as a force to take on the rest of the world. We're competing and fighting against each other. We really should be outwardly focused to form this bloc or ally with another trading bloc to become larger. So that is the challenge for CARICOM. Is CARICOM large enough? 6.5 million persons in a market. Clearly, the reason for a regional integration movement, a common market, is not just for you to sell to people in your common market. It is for that common market and the group of actors to work together, to coordinate and integrate and to seize the advantage when they go collectively. And with multilateral organizations, United Nations, Organization of American States, World Bank, the collective voting power of 50 nations is certainly more than one. So if CARICOM unites its arguments in these international fora, we can extract more value instead of us going 2 different ways. And so CARICOM, there was a study done, a commission, the Golden Commission, not very long ago, that studied whether or not Jamaica should remain in CARICOM. And Capri and others participated in that study, very good study, 120 pages, that everybody should read. to see really they're reiterating some of the issues of CARICOM, but really without a blueprint for going forward. It concluded we come back in 5 years and look again and decide that's not good enough. Time is going. We're hearing the urgency of now based upon, of course, the global environment I'm describing. And of course, we are all languishing. We see CARICOM has no time to waste. We see disasters in St. Vincent. We see other issues. We're waiting for the next hurricane to come along. We really have to engage together, deal with climate change, get some resources from others into our countries, and of course, ensure that we can deal with exogenous shock. So that's my CARICOM story. It needs leadership.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I've literally been taking notes, and yes, we're going to add the Capri document to the next thing that we have to read. So you're giving us a lot of homework here, Ambassador. But Mawali was not finished with his question. He had a part 2. And Mawali asked, where does the region stand in terms of cryptocurrencies and blockchain? Should we be looking to develop our own?
Cryptocurrencies, is it a bubble or is it real? Cryptocurrencies. So I start off with the foundation of cryptocurrency, which is blockchain. Blockchain is real. Blockchain technologies is going to be part of everything. From the moment you produce goods, every time you touch it, there is a detailed record kept of every step. So it will help to authenticate goods from fake goods and so on. If something went wrong, you would know exactly. Using blockchain technologies, it is going to be in the customs, it is going to be in everything. So countries are adopting systems built upon blockchain. So we know that works. Many computers validating and verifying build trust. Cryptocurrencies are based upon blockchain technology, where persons have created Bitcoin and Dogecoin and other currencies, Ethereum, and sometimes they were a joke, but people were willing to buy these currencies. The argument of, is it a fiat currency backed by something or non-fiat, comes into the question, who's backing it, who's supporting it? And of course, those questions remain open, who's regulating it? But the key point is that they're operating outside of the stifling regulatory environment of central banks and other players. And so people are willing to trust that. Now, to determine if it's real, we can look at activity on Wall Street, where major financial houses have taken positions in Bitcoin and other currencies. Cryptocurrencies are now an asset class, bonds and stocks and so on, but they are very high risk. So let's start with that. High risk and high return with high volatility, okay? So it's still early in the game, but fortunes are being made. But fortunes are being lost. You bought Bitcoin at 54,000 and it's now down to 30,000. You have lost your family's wealth. But if you had a tax strategy for using that, which you can, to cover gains on other parts of your portfolio, if you still have one, and you could buy back your Bitcoin at the 30,000, you'll be ahead of the game. So the big players are the ones that are winning. Big players, not little players, are the ones that are winning. But we should study this, and I'm studying it. And what I don't own any, and I should have a little piece, just a little piece, so you can watch the market. But don't remember now, it's high risk. Therefore, you don't bet the whole house on it, but you could have a little play money, right? That you could use to experiment with it, but follow the markets and see how it evolves. But I do believe that it will take a different shape that central banks are looking at creating their own digital currency. So digital currencies, of course, can serve a purpose rather than specie than physical paper, especially in COVID when you transmit the virus by touching. There is a powerful argument that though the Bank of Jamaica is studying its own digital currency, I'm not sure how far they have advanced. So again, a very interesting question relating to emergence of new technologies, cryptocurrencies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. So it's emerging, it's new, but you'd also still advise us to make sure we're studying the market, do our research some more, and of course, after all of that, we can make a decision if it's definitely something we can put on investment in. Thank you so much, Ambassador. The chat is still firing up, so we have a few more questions to pose to the Ambassador. And this was from Stephen. He says, good evening, Ambassador. Would you share the opinion that globalization has provided advantages for Latin America and the Caribbean as they begin to make strides? The rules of the game seem to change, and the concept of globalization is recalibrated. Therefore, Latin America and Caribbean countries end up in the losing or less advantageous position. I'll go again, Ambassador, because it's a little bit long. So good evening, Ambassador. And Stephen is asking, would you share the opinion that while globalization has provided advantages for Latin America and the Caribbean as they begin to make strides, the rules of the game seem to change, and the concept of globalization is recalibrated. Therefore, Latin American and Caribbean countries end up losing or have a less advantageous position.
Stephen, I thank you for positioning the statement in that way, because I agree with you completely that but I'll put the word may, that we may be losing ground because the other large players are repositioning and resetting the global agenda. So we never were the big movers. Latin America and the Caribbean, of course, with its emerging economies, we have Brazil, the BRICS. Brazil was, of course, large player, no serious COVID epidemic disrupting their economy. So they have not been able to respond as well as they might have responded. So these are some of the challenges in Latin America. Some countries are having some challenges, a little slow to vaccinate, a little slow to respond, some in denial, some accepting, but again, we see Trinidad, we see COVID affecting us. So we are not so well positioned to move, but we have to reposition and re-engage. And I talked earlier, of course, about how, Stephen, how we could have engaged with the European Union and the UK to really reset the trade arrangements and to maybe have some arrangement with those, with America, with Europe, with Asia, that will strengthen our position, relative position, and not much happening on our side. There are a number of regional integration movements beyond CARICOM, ALBA, and some others, many others, that I'm not aware of what they're doing to fire up, to help to take a share, a piece of the new emerging global economy, because when the cards are rearranged, the picture will look a lot different. And so Steve, I thank you for that. That's very perceptive.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. So we have a few more questions in the chat. And Stephen, I think Ambassador gave you some food for thought there and added on for you. And so we have Seaton asking, how do you tax cryptocurrency? And aren't government invested cryptocurrency safer? So how do you tax it? And are government invested cryptocurrency safer?
Wow. You know, that's an oxymoron, government and cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is antithetical to the government. The way it is rebellious and revolutionary. And that people are saying, look, they don't want governments to regulate and control, but we see governments actually recognizing now that is not just a game and actually trying to bring them into the mainstream. And a number of laws are being enacted. In America, in many states, right, the laws are being enacted, of course, to optimize in some way the environment for cryptocurrencies and to ensure that people are protected and it can operate safely, because there are benefits it can provide. It provides a medium of exchange for goods and services. Up until 3 weeks ago, you could buy a Tesla, the self-driving car, with Bitcoin. Of course, Elon Musk changed his mind, and you can no longer buy the car using cryptocurrency. But that's a test of exchanging without using a currency. The issue of foreign exchange and all of that, and arbitrage and so on, goes out the window, because people have found, can find new ways, secure ways of exchanging value. China looks at it. We're also seeing a little bit of pushback from China on cryptocurrencies. We're not sure where this will all end up because governments are looking at it with an eye to say that, you know, it's a reality, but how can they ensure it works for their benefit? And nobody is quite sure who are the actors behind it and how will it play out. So taxation, again, that's going to become an issue too, because presently where people are talking about taxing e-commerce, that takes place across the internet. How do they tax that? What's the jurisdiction of a transaction? There are all kinds of legal questions and tax questions that are coming from that. Can you imagine the questions that will arise in terms of governments taxing transactions that are being conducted over platforms using cryptocurrencies? Now, behind cryptocurrency, there are some companies, some real companies, like Coinbase and so on, which are the platforms over which people can trade. And you can get to those companies, governments can get to them because they are resident in some country. So you can invest in cryptocurrencies, of course, or you can invest in the companies that trade cryptocurrencies with different outcomes. So I suspect that the taxation might be more towards those platforms, those exchanges, to see if governments can extract some value from the transaction. But it's going to be a tremendous challenge. And of course, the knowledge and the technology that would have to exist in the tax department at the Ministry of Finance of Jamaica, I don't know if we yet have those people. We might. If not, you would have to acquire them to make it happen. But we'll continue to watch the evolution of that. And that's a very good point to say what actions can nations take to extract some return from a whole set of transactions now that is going to dwarf the global economy, the global payment system in a few years. Maybe.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. So it's something we still have to watch, still very novel, still very new, and it does have to see, because as you rightly said, legal implication, what goes on across the jurisdictions. And so as you said, something we just definitely have to watch and see if the governments will catch up and we'll have something that we can definitely look at. So thank you again, Ambassador, and thank you so much throughout the entire session for one, an informative and very cogent presentation. I really learned a lot, and I think everyone on the platform can wholeheartedly agree. And then you gave us homework, the long Capri document, and a movie that we need to watch. So we remember that, Ambassador. But more so, you engaged with us, and we really appreciated it, from just taking on integration, talking about the cryptocurrency. Ambassador, you've really done it all. And I just want to give you some virtual round of applause because you really did amazing, and we're very much grateful. So thank you again, Ambassador. And I hope those on the chat can also put some emojis and big up Ambassador, because you really did a stellar job. So everybody's sending you thanks, Ambassador, because we're really grateful. And of course, oh, I see someone hand is up. I'm not sure if that's a question or a legacy hand, but I'm giving you a quick minute or so to jump on if you have a question. All right.
Sorry, it was a mistake, but I will ask a quick question. Thank you, Ambassador, for a great presentation. You did mention that the human resource issue is a very important one, and that Jamaicans go abroad and win awards. So from your vantage point, what do you see as the critical priority that we need to set before us in terms of human resource development?
Right, I thank you for that question, because human resources run through the thread of everything we're talking about here. And to the people that carry out the tasks, of course, are going to determine the result, the effectiveness of your company, your institution, your school, and so on. And the question is, are we producing the right skill sets? We can question the same thing in the University of West Indies. We ask this question all the time. Are we producing the people that Jamaica needs to compete? We certainly produce in some very good areas, the best doctors and so on. But and the best business people from the business school. Let me make a commercial for Bowdoin School of Business while I'm here, and from other parts of the school. But how do we invest the scarce dollars in producing skills and capabilities? Now, this starts across Jamaica. This starts from basic education. Basic education feeds into primary education, into tertiary, and of course, thereafter. We have to start with the babies. We have to start with digital natives. When babies touch your cell phone, it works. When you give it to an adult for the first time, they look at it as if it will break. So first of all, there are two kinds: digital natives and digital migrants. I'm a digital migrant. I've learned to adapt to the digital technology. So those who are coming need to be trained, educated in a different way, to think, not just by rote, not just by repetition and so on, but real critical thinking must be in it, and use of technologies to enable. Laptops, online technologies, access to resources and ebooks. The best instructors in the world from anywhere talking to our children, even in basic schools, can make a difference. You can improve performance. The small businesses, education, programs to help to understand the new environment, not to get people there step by step, but to maybe throw a lot of what we know out the window and start again with a clean sheet and say, this is what we might need to know. There's some catching up, of course, but what do we need to know to advance in this global environment? And we prioritize that and make that part of education in every level of education, in our offices also, and in our daily lives. And as we adapt to technology, we will not fall behind North America and other places. We're falling further behind without realizing it because of the use of enabling technologies. And so, of course, some foreign travel and virtual travel to see what's going on in the globe, as we're doing tonight. And so I commend those who have taken the time out to really come into this webinar to sort of engage on a topic like this. I think this is a good way of learning. I see a note here from my colleague, Ambassador, thanks, this is William Lawrence, a colleague from Bowdoin School of Business that he and I worked very closely in strategy, and he's a consultant who has helped many Jamaican companies across to solve strategic problems and across the Caribbean. And he said, please say how Jamaica can best navigate its relationship with both USA and China. You see, that's what friends are for. They put you right in the middle of the geopolitics. So, excellent question, William. I think it's a very important question that we have to face because we are caught in geopolitics between two superpowers. We saw at the onset of globalization that we did get caught between two superpowers in the Cold War and the result it had on the Jamaican economy, yeah? Russia and the USA. Now we're seeing global powers contending, and primarily USA and China, with both countries with which we have excellent relationships with. We have had an unusually close relationship with the United States of America because, of course, we are adjacent to the USA. We have a very large diaspora living in the USA. We have exchanges. We have billions of dollars of remittances coming in. People go back and forward. People admire the USA way of life and education, and people travel and so on. So it stands to reason that small countries will need friends across the globe. That's the first rule. But small countries cannot get themselves caught in the vice of the foreign policy consequence of two large powers, which requires adroit diplomacy. It requires conversations to take place. It requires appropriate voting behavior at the Organization of American States, at the United Nations, and in other places where your vote matters. And how do you use the vote? And how do you use the vote individually or collectively as CARICOM can take away some of the heat from those negotiations. Jamaica has benefited from foreign direct investment from China, as it has from America, and more recently, a lot has flowed into Jamaica. Clearly, balancing those relationships will become an increasing challenge. And in all of that, Jamaica must consider two things. One, its own foreign policy interests. Also, context. Context matters. We must understand the context in which we operate. We must understand our own strengths and weaknesses versus the opportunities and threats that we face from the global environment. So I say we need to, maybe at this time, beef up our diplomatic resources. Think before we speak. Take some of the conversations off the front pages and into private discussions to solve common problems. So my colleague William and to others, that's my best answer, my most diplomatic answer that I can provide at this time.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And see, there you go again, Ambassador, engaging with us, and we really appreciate it. So thank you once again. And see, Denise said she learns a lot, and I also share the sentiment. Well, Ambassador, we're creeping up to the closing of this webinar. And again, to reiterate the appreciation and also thanking you, the members of the audience who came out, whether you're here in Jamaica or abroad, we thank you so much for being huddled on Zoom land to listen to the Ambassador, to speak to us and inform us. It was my pleasure, Tomoy Campbell, being your moderator for this evening, or whether it is morning on your side. I wish you all the very best, and I do hope that you come to our next webinar and session. And also many thanks to the UE team for making this event possible and always making it amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Tomoy Campbell signing out, and I hope you have a great night or a great morning, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
And a word of thanks to all who attended, and for the IAD for putting this on, and for all those who participated tonight. Thank you so much. It's been a good evening. Thank you. Thank you, my moderator, Tomoy Campbell. Good job.